Why, hello. How's it going? It's me, your host, VGA Fireside and VGA Director of Exhibitions, Chaz Evans. I'm so glad that you could join us. We have a lovely program planned for you this evening. Before I'm just making some quick height adjustments on this desk. Yeah, that's better. Okay. Quick, Bryce just wanted to address the time thing. And now that we've done it, we are moving forward by thanking all the people who have helped us make this program possible, because gratitude is the true path. I'd like to thank producer and director of operations for VGA, Bryce Pauls, and the designer and director of communications for VGA, Eleanor Schichtel. I want to thank the VGA staff and the VGA board for all the work you do keeping the organization alive. I want to thank the Independent Game Designers Association Chicago chapter. Thank you, Ross, for helping spread the word. And I want to say hello and welcome to the Intro to New Media class at UIC. Thanks, UIC, the University of Illinois at Chicago, that is. Thanks to Eleanor for helping spread the word. I want to welcome the game design students at the University of Wisconsin. Thanks to Peter. I want to thank the media art and graphic design and illustration students in the School of Visual Art and Design at the University of South Carolina. Thanks to Mina and Byungwon for spreading the word. And I want to say hello to students from DePaul who study game design. Thanks to Caleb for spreading the word. I also want to give a welcome to students from Northwestern Media Art and Game Design module. Thanks to Derek for helping spread the word. And a new group. I am very thrilled if you're tuning in. We want to welcome digital media practice students from Tulane University. Thanks to John for helping spread the word. I want to thank the Electric Mirrors for the groovy intro music you were just enjoying. And I want to thank the Oldham Music Center Youth Brass Band for the fanfare that is about to lift our spirits. And finally, if you know of an organization or group that would be interested in this program or have any feedback whatsoever, please drop us a line at info@vgagallery.org. We would love to hear from you. That's all the thank yous and welcomes. Bryce, please hit us with a VGA Fireside fanfare. Yes! Terrific. The VGA Fireside fanfare has sounded. Our hearts are now in ideal spirits, I hope. And it's time to welcome today's esteemed guest. VGA Gallery welcomes Amanda Hudgins for a new episode of VGA Fireside. Hudgins is a writer, game designer, and much more, based out of Lexington, Kentucky. Their work, which has been shown internationally, pushes the boundaries of what a video game controller can consist of, and they are a columnist for the digital magazine Unwinnable. Everyone at home, please help me welcome Amanda Hudgins.
Hello.
Amanda, welcome.
Hi.
How are you feeling?
I'm okay. It's wet here.
It's wet
So,
where I am in South Carolina as well.
yeah, it's been raining
Well,
for like 2 days.
yeah, there was actually a tornado
Oh,
warning. I had to go to the hallway and hang out for a half an hour with my 2-year-old as
oh
we
no.
waited for Tuna's Fest. So it's pretty. But that's not really relevant, and it's in the past. I hope all of the silent but sincere applause from every corner of the internet it finds you well. And I'm so glad you could join us to talk about your work on VGA Fireside this evening. So, as I mentioned with the welcomes, there are a number of viewers who may be getting into the field of video games, game making, or even non-digital game making, maybe for the first time, or maybe in their first few years. So we always like to know, about the origin stories of those who are already in the field of making interesting work. So, could we just start off by asking you simply?
Yes.
How did you get involved with video game making?
Okay. I actually graduated from the University of Kentucky with a degree in English literature.
Mm-hmm.
So not really in game making at all, not at
Right.
least the way that people traditionally think of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started dating my now husband. And around the time I started dating him, he was like, oh, I think you'd really like, he used to run these things on his own that he called creative jams, where the idea was you would make something. It's basically a game jam, but it wasn't, because some people quilted and some people like made sweaters. And I think I wrote a children's book for one of his like early creative jams. And he's like, oh, if you like this, then you'll definitely like this game jam that's coming up. It was Global Game Jam, I think 2011, 2012. Whatever the year was that the heartbeat was a theme. And I was like, oh, this is fun. So I made a bunch of HTML web pages that connected, after which someone was like, oh, so did you use Twine? Because that's basically what Twine is.
That'll attach some HTML pages for you.
No, I did not use Twine. I used HTML pages.
Also works.
It worked, but yeah, so that opened it up for a lot of things. I actually went back and got a second degree, again, from UK in media arts and studies. It's a Telecommunications Degree, is what it used to be called. And basically what I like to tell people is that it covers everything from how an AM radio tower works to how to build a website. It's a very broad degree.
Yeah.
So I have 2 degrees from the University of Kentucky. And then for that degree, I had to get a internship. So I talked to one of the 3 local studios in Lexington, and I have been working for them ever since.
Terrific. You want to mention that group or organization?
Oh, sorry, SuperSoul. So the organization that I worked with, the Game Jam, was Run Jump Dev, which is our local organization that I'm now sort of a volunteer coordinator for. And then the company is SuperSoul. Sorry, it's been a while since I've talked about all this. It's a lot of information to impart very quickly.
Yeah, it's all important information to put together the story.
Yes.
So we have a number of projects to talk about this evening.
Yes.
And I'm particularly interested to talk to you about your work with our alternative controller games. Before we actually dip into one of the projects themselves, in that story you just gave us, was there a particular moment when designing custom and so let's say non-normative controllers became a part of what you wanted to do, or was it just sort of happening all throughout?
Well, so again, my background is very non-traditional, so I like to say that helps me ignore a lot of the constraints because I don't know why they're there. So I don't know enough about what I'm doing to not know why I can't do it. Yeah. So I actually got into alternative control. In game design, it's more frequently called alternative controls, sort of the big blanket term for it. It's also, I like to tell people that because it's way easier to look it up because it covers a broad scheme of things. But I got into alternative controls actually because SuperSoul made a game that was featured at All Control GDC. It was made by one of my previous employers, Richie Hoagland, mostly, but also SuperSoul at large, and it was called Deluxe Turbo Racing 360. And you raced if you've ever had a 360 Xbox 360 controller on your table and it starts vibrating.
Sure.
the design of that was that you would he made the motors equal so you could race them across a table.
So they became the representation instead of what was on screen.
Yeah, so it became a physical sort of racing game using the controllers as actual things. It was a really good idea. It was at I think the inaugural Alt Control GDC, because I think it was the first one, because that's where I also saw Robin Baumgarten's piece Line Wobbler, and a couple of other things. I think that's where I met Jerry Belich. He's another sort of prominent designer, and just saw a lot of different pieces from all over the world. And that was what really got me thinking, oh, this would be a fun thing to do. So I don't even know what year that was.
Sometime along the path.
Oh, hey, Jerry.
Welcome. Jerry. Thanks for joining us this evening. Oh, yeah, and that I guess seeing the graphics flash Bryce and for others, it's a good time to remind the viewers at home, please, anytime you have a question for Amanda, please just go ahead and type it in. I have a bunch of questions that are lined up here, but I bet yours will be better. So go ahead and send me yours. And
they're good questions.
Okay, thank you. Stop. Okay, so I guess for we're still introducing the field, and we'll just do one more question.
What is alternative controls?
How, or more importantly, if for your practice and the way you like to go about making, like how do you scope it? How do you like to define the field?
So alternative controls, I basically like keeping my categorization broad, because the fewer sort of barriers you put into place in a categorization, the more open it is. So this is my definition. This is not everyone's definition, but I effectively like to label anything as an alternative controller that is not a standardized controller. So your keyboard, mouse, that's a standard controller. Anything from, say, PlayStation, Microsoft, Nintendo, those are all standard controllers. Even when you get into some really interesting conversation with, say, the Wiimote as an alternative controller, or the PlayStation Move controller. But I like to disregard those generally, and it's usually anything that operates outside that scheme, that sort of concept, and that's an alternative controller. So usually they're things you usually only see at shows, generally speaking, just because of the nature of their design. But if you've ever gone to, say, a children's museum, you've probably interacted with something that I would classify as an alternative control. Anything that responded, say, to physical touch when it was meant to be, like, say, a giant tooth. I would still classify that as an alternative controller.
So I think is a good way to frame it, because some might say, well, what about, when a new system comes out, it's like, oh, we have the Switch now. Isn't that an alternative to those controllers you just mentioned? It's like, maybe for a day, it's an alternative controller.
And there are definitely creative uses of, like, say, traditional controllers. So, for example, Deluxe Turbo Racing 360, which I led with, or Johann Sebastian Joust is actually a really good example of that. Is definitely not the way that anyone at PlayStation ever really intended for the Move controller to be used.
Yes.
But that would be like a good example. You're just chasing people around a room, kind of.
That's good to mention. So it includes both when we're getting the soldering irons out and we're getting the sensors together. That is a part of this field, but also just a very creative sort of reorientation or disorientation of one of those standardized controllers can also be considered a part of this as well.
And again, this is my personal definition. It's a very broad category, and there are people who, everyone from, say, Phoenix Perry to Robin, again, like there's a very large breadth of people who would probably have different definitions, but this is mine.
Terrific. Using that definition that we possess, because you've mentioned it on the program, let's dive into some of the work. I'm particularly interested in talking about a recent exhibition of claw machine alternative games called the Claw. Can we, maybe Bryce, can we share some footage from the Claw that maybe Bryce has waiting in the wings? Perfect. So we've got this video going, and feel free to give us the DVD commentary track on what we're seeing.
Okay, this is probably also just going to include a lot of footage, general footage. So the claw is a exhibition of 8 art claw machines, is what I've kind of been calling it. But basically the idea is we purchased a bunch of claw machines from actually a place in Pittsburgh, or right outside Pittsburgh at like an auction house. And we had a bunch of different local artists add their own spin on the individual claw machine. So the idea was to take something that was a consumer grade product that you would see at a Steak and Shake. Actually, most of these came from Steak and Shakes because they still had the branding inside of them when we got them. The idea was to take something that you would see, just anywhere and reimagine it. We were kind of basing it off of the idea of a lot of cities had those big fiberglass objects that were painted individually. In Lexington, they're horses because Kentucky and horses. But we were kind of thinking of that, like if we gave everyone a standardized object, what would they come up with? And so the options are, say this one, which is by one of my Super Soul fellow employees, Shay Rumbold. And it's sort of a digital claw machine that where you pick up figures, and then it has a little window on the front where they trap them, and you're a giant terrifying claw from the sky kidnapping cute animals and dropping them into a hole. So there's everything from that to there's a Zen machine that I hate calling it that. It's a rock garden. That's just what we called it on like the back end.
Right.
But it's a rock garden where you drag a rake through rocks, and it kind of really felt like a challenge to when you see a claw machine, what you think of, which is, the idea of grabbing something and taking it. And it was more about creating this really tranquil space where you play and move, but in, a very sort of sedate manner.
When I saw this documentation for the first time, that the rock garden one quickly became a visual favorite, just because it so quickly takes the claw machine and puts it in a different direction. It's the claw machine that doesn't take.
There is no collection at all happening from that machine. It was also, just to be totally frank, very fun to like design visually.
Yeah.
Even though conceptually, basically none of these machines are running their original code. They have their original. They're still in there. Like all the stuff is still in there. You could plug them in, and they theoretically still work as claw machines. Yeah. We're running them through like I think it's mostly Teensies. To sort of cheat the very, very old boards.
And I guess I don't know how relevant this is, but I'm just so curious. Yeah. What were they all the same units that came from the Steak and Shakes, or did you have to learn the ins and outs of like several different kinds?
They're basically all the same units. So they're mostly Premier machines. Is I think the manufacturer. Their Premier and Win stuff. There is, I think 4 of them are identical. 4 of them are identical machines. Like they're all exactly the same machine. And then there's 2 more that are that have fancier cabinets. And then there's one that is a different color and a different shape than all the other ones. It's both larger and heavier, and it's black. And it's the one we used. We just filled it with local art. Because it was a little bit too far from the others to fit that standardized sort of concept. Every person who came to the gallery got a token that they could use to, that's the machine. But every person got a token that they could use. Yeah, one, if they wanted, just one.
Oh,
and
you have to choose very carefully.
And it's also, no, just one, and it works only on that machine. All the other machines are free to play.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Yeah. We wanted you to have that experience of playing like a claw machine, the way a claw machine's meant to be played. Because a lot of people would come in and they would tell me, "Oh, I've never played one before," or like, "My parents thought it was gambling."
Right.
By the way, it totally is.
Yeah, I had that experience. Yeah. No, we can never play a claw game. It's forbidden. So yeah, to have them on free play is this sort of like totally head spinning, prospect.
Yeah, I've been wanting to do this kind of show for 4 or 5 years. And it just so happened that the stars aligned. I have a friend out of Pennsylvania named Socks. He does all the stuff for, he's I think now the head of sort of the MagFest Indie Arcade area specifically for indie cabinets. And he's the person who told me about these machines being available.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, we've got to go. Because I think grand total, we spent something like $300 on the machines themselves.
Yeah. Wait, how much was that?
$300.
That is rather affordable.
Yes. I mean, getting them home was way more expensive. But...
Yeah. And now to move them from a site to site for other people to see them would be more expensive than that in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
So I just have one other question about this, but I'm still just sort of dazzled by the documentation. The work is rendered me speechless, Amanda.
Thank you. A lot of people worked on this.
Yeah. Do you want to get so we have it on record? Do you want to mention?
Okay. So this machine was made. Sure. Like this, the white. Let's see. A lot of the cabinets. I was involved in 3 specific cabinets: the Rock Garden, something called Specimen Theo, which is a sort of haunted claw machine idea. Mm-hmm. And I worked a little bit on the 2-player cabinet, which is a 2-player back-to-back. The 2-player cabinet was mostly made by Supersol, the company I work for, and mm-hmm. is sort of the brainchild of John Meister, who is my boss here at Supersol. And then Shay Rembold, who also worked on the Micro Monsters kind of machine, also worked on this one. And we couldn't have done it without John's wife. She did a lot of the touch-up painting on the end, and it just looks so polished in person. That's Specimen Theo with the sort of guts in it. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It's very wet looking, but you tell it things. Well. You tell it things, and it spits out dreams from a receipt printer out the front. That one I worked on with my partner Matthew Hudgins, who's also a pretty accomplished alternative games designer. This is R25th. He's done a bunch of all control work as well. And it's sort of, someone gave me a really good name for it. I think it was like Recursive Cabinet. The idea is at the very top, you have all these claws move no matter what you do. Mm-hmm. And so you pick up something and you drop it in, and there's a tube from the top claw machine to the second claw machine to the bottom, and you have to just keep picking things up. But then once you get to the end, they just fill up the bottom. Right. You don't get any prizes.
It's just a volume has been satisfied.
Yeah, and then R25th also worked on the Rock Garden cabinet. And then I think the only cabinet I didn't include footage of in this because I had a really hard time taking photos of it. It's really, really good. It's a cabinet by Shiloh Shepherd, a local artist. It is entirely black, which is why I had such a hard time getting video of that cabinet. It's black and reflective because she's using this really cool 3D technology inside of it. So it does it's like this older 3D digital technology where you it uses glass. It's very cool looking. It's impossible to photograph.
Okay. So you just had to be there for that one.
Yeah, that one is, I have documentation of it, but I didn't have time to very carefully go through and make sure it was good documentation.
That's really all right. Yeah. So as exciting as this is, and I'm glad you could mention your collaborators, and well done. I realized that I was like, oh, it would be great to hear what the other artists are, but then I realized I was putting you on the spot. Great job with the recall.
I think I got them all. I hope I got them all. I'm so sorry if I forgot someone.
We'll edit it on the post afterwards if we need to. Anyway, let's switch gears and check out another project. Something that I think is close to the VGA staff, because this went down in Chicago not too long ago.
Couldn't have happened without them.
Yeah, so this is happened a project called One Night Only that happened at BitBash. And Bryce, what year BitBash was that? It's just an opportunity to get Bryce's graphics.
It would have been 2019.
2019, right before, yes. This is right before something happened.
So, something minor.
Yeah.
Didn't alter the landscape of all control design at all. When
we still love to join in public space with hundreds of people to play video games, a project called One Night Only transpired. Could we look at some footage from that and tell us about it?
It's also, it was very loud.
Right.
I
Can you listen
also
to its loudness for a second? Is that important for people to know?
I don't know. I mean, the music was very important
Yeah.
component to it because I did actually pay for all the music in it.
Right.
But the very, very, very,
Okay.
very true.
Very good point, Bryce. We will. Oh, we're going for it anyway.
Oh, this is a good choice for that. But yeah, this is One Night Only. Also, thank you to everyone who captured footage because I didn't.
Sometimes it takes a group effort. Okay, so what are we looking at? What's happening with One Night Only?
Okay, so One Night Only was actually inspired by a it was actually inspired by a GDC party that I neither went to and also didn't happen. I think it was canceled because the guy who organized it was an abuser. It would have been either early 2019 or late 20, or I think it would have been 2019's GDC. I saw a post from I think it was Natalie Lawhead talking about it, and I was like, oh, that sounds really great. And the idea was that people made games for this event, and then at the end of the event, the game was destroyed. And so I was like, oh, that would be great, except, like, okay, so you deleted the code, but like the computer is still there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm an alt control designer.
Right.
If I destroy things, I can destroy them.
Everything.
Yeah. And so that was sort of the idea. And I contacted BitBash and I said, joking, I was actually at a bar.
Mm-hmm.
And I texted BitBash and I said, hey, how much could you budget for me to smash guitars on stage at BitBash this year? And they wrote back and said, oh, how much you thinking?
Yeah.
Like, send
enthusiastic response.
Enthusiastic support 100% of the way, which meant I had to now figure out how much money was doable. And so this was, I believe it was 16 guitars.
Mm-hmm.
And the controller that sometimes worked, that's mostly on me. We had to go through a lot of gloves and vague protection measures. And the idea was it was kind of a Rock Band-ish game. And oh, yep, there's my partner as well. They also, so this was also a thing I worked on with my partner, Matthew Hudgins, as well. And so we smashed guitars on stage. It went super well. People had a lot of fun, I think. And yeah, it was exactly one night only. And
because you just didn't have any more guitars after the fact, so it's just done.
It was so expensive.
But was this particular guitar chosen for its affordability, or did you choose really expensive guitars?
The cheapest guitar you could buy on Amazon at the time. I think I spent $500 just on guitars. I picked it because all of the reviews said, like, I bought this for my grandchild and it couldn't hold a tune. Like, I picked it because no one should play these guitars. I also tried to leave that review and Amazon wouldn't let me. So,
so you get a batch of guitars and you customize them to play this homebrew rhythm game that's Guitar Hero-esque.
Yes.
And then at what point does the participant decide to smash? Is it up to them or?
No. So the idea is you're fighting this figure. In this case, it's the guy with the safety cone as a head. So you're fighting him. It's a boss fight. It's a boss fight. You play the rhythm game, and at the very end, it will tell you on screen smash. And there is a metal plate on the floor, and it registers when you smash because there's copper tape all along the thing. And so you smash, and then when you do that, it sets him on fire.
So it's not just the guitar; it's the floor itself. Everyone should understand is the control scheme. Yeah,
and all the art is stuff I made from mostly stuff in my house, and I drew a bunch of figures and then set them on fire. So it's all actual fire that got me flagged on TikTok.
Terrific. I wanted to ask, like, so did you ever get to smash one on yourself?
No.
Not even through in testing, right? So
Well,
this is
no, it's too expensive to test. I never
right.
tested it.
So like, as you said, this is a thing, the kind of thing that does take a certain amount of investment,
Yes.
and that's not it's non-significant, and you give that away to other people. You didn't even get to give this a shot on your own. So I guess that
yeah,
brings me
people
to
are always weirded out by that. When I tell people that, they're always like, "You didn't test it?" And I was like, "No."
I bring it up because I think it's remarkable and sort of maybe speaks to a kind of philosophy or ethic about like your attitude towards an audience. When you make when there's so much focus on the controller and like who gets to sort of, this is functionally a work of performance art, but the role of gamer now becomes role of performer for an audience as well. So like, I guess I want to know if you could talk about that. If you have a sort of a attitude about like, I guess generosity, like, or is that sort of like a goal about making sure that like these things are like that could be possessed by the artist end up being given away,
Well, I
audience.
think for me at least, alternative control design is about experience over everything else, right? So it's about sensation. So Sententable, which is probably the piece I'm best known for, and we have not talked about it all because to be fair, because I've talked about it everywhere else. Sententable was about the experience of being like 9 years old and playing Street Fighter against your cousin for the first time and then beating you. And I wanted you to feel that. And so
many of us still play Street Fighter, but yeah.
Yeah, but that same sensation of being there for the first time and not knowing what's going on and like being stuck and trapped. I wanted that sensation. And so for me, alt control is sensation and experience. Yeah. And similarly, that's kind of also the case with, say, One Night Only, which is the idea of I wanted you to have that sensation of being a rock star. And Bitbash was kind enough to also give me like a stage. It's not clear from these photos, but this is a stage. It is like a 500, 700 person auditorium, easy. It had like a second level with like a thing you could sit up on top of, which I'm spacing on the name of right now. It was huge. Like when they told me they were giving me a stage, I thought they meant one of those like fold out ones.
Yeah, and this whole additional wing of the Museum of Science and Industry in Chicago, only sometimes used. I hope it's okay I mentioned that. Right.
Yeah. But massive stage. So I wanted you to feel like a rock star, and to feel like a rock star is to stand on the middle of a stage and absolutely demolish a guitar, which is something like you'll never get to do, right? Mm-hmm. Like most of us will never be in a position where we can destroy a guitar, which might have been $30 a piece. Like you'll never get to experience that. And so that's, for me, that's there we go. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Oh, nice. Yeah. A spectacular space to be able to actually enjoy a guitar smashing like gesture and feel like you didn't have to practice your whole life and then go on tour in order to sort of earn that right. Someone's completely saying this is okay, you should do this right now. You just get it. And I wanted that for me is alternative control. So I guess there's an element there of generosity, but it's mostly just 100%. Like I want somebody to have the experience of doing this thing, this wild and crazy thing. Like one of the projects that I eventually scrapped because I just couldn't find a way to do it that would be fun was I always thought it'd be fun to take like a sledgehammer to a cake. Sure. And there's video online of like testing the feel of this. Like I put it up on my own YouTube channel of me and R25th testing like how this feels. And the answer is not very fun. Not fun. Okay. Like, I don't know why I thought it would be like in retrospect, but it was like, that sounds like a fun thing is, like taking a cake and sledgehammering it. That would be fun. So like one of the first things we usually test, not here, is like, is this even a fun sensation? And then if it is, then you go for it. And if it isn't, then there's just a video on YouTube of you smashing a cake you baked with a sledgehammer. If not fun, do you have any other like descriptions or words of review for what it's like to sledgehammer a cake? Flat. The sledgehammer's too heavy. So when it hits the cake puts up no resistance. Arguably, we tested like 4 or 5 things. We tested like a Jell-O surprise from the recipe from the 50s. We tested, I think the best thing was actually like, those rice cake, wafer cake things, like they're like Nutter Butters. Sure. I remember Nutty Bars.
Or Nutty Buddies, the ones that have like the layers inside. They have a little crunch to them.
Those are the Little Debbie Nutty Bars.
Yeah, Nutty Bars. So we tested those. And out of everything, those probably had the best because they had like a crunch to them.
Right.
But anything softer and it just goes through them. It's not fun.
Right. There's one other sort of, I guess, philosophy question or about alternative control that I want to ask here, which is that that both players of games and makers of games usually can often use a term like controller and display as a shorthand as two separate things. And I guess I want to know if that dichotomy makes sense for you when you're working on a project like this. Is there a boundary or a threshold between controller and display, or does it become a little more enmeshed?
I think there's a boundary, generally speaking, between the thing you touch and the thing you're engaging with, but that boundary can become skewed. So it's something I'm more interested in now because I have some vision things that are happening to me right now. I have a degenerative eye disorder, and it's kind of ruining my vision. And it's called keratoconus, and it basically means that whenever I see a light, I basically see 6 of that light. So as you can imagine, looking at a screen, not the most fun. So looking at displays, also not the most fun. So I've been working for the last 2 years mostly on trying to design things that engage with you through touch and through sound, and sort of playing into those concepts a little bit more strongly. And so in that sense, I've been starting to find that the word display isn't doing the legwork that it used to, right? Because for me, it used to be, of course, there's a display, and however you present that display is a thing, right? It could be, say, we'll use line wobbler, because if anyone's seen an alt control game, it's usually line wobbler, because Robin's done a phenomenal job of getting those everywhere. Yeah. But it's a one-dimensional, for anyone who hasn't seen it, it is a one-dimensional dungeon crawler that uses an LED light strip as its display. And then as its control, it has a sort of a spring with a ball on it, and it's a little box. And that works really well. That's a really good example of control box and display, because you can understand display in a way that isn't just a screen or a projection. Mm-hmm. And so line wobbler.
Shout out to line wobbler.
Sorry for giving all these outside jumps. But
Francis is a pro, don't worry.
So so you have something like line wobbler, where you have the controller, which is in your hand, and then you have the display. But like, what happens if, say, what you're doing just responds to, say, rumbling touch, for example? Mm-hmm. There was, I don't remember the name of it, but the first year I went to All Control GDC, there was a game that you played by sticking your hand in a box, and you don't know what's in the box. And spoiler alert, because I was there and I saw them excitedly loading the box, but it is squishy, gross things. Mm-hmm. And the idea, you touch your hand in there, but in that case, the display is also kind of your touch. Mm-hmm. And so that interaction is something entirely different, I think.
So if the word display, as it's conventionally known, doesn't seem to do the work for us anymore, I mean, and working with alternative controllers reveals that. It's safe to say that working with alternative controls isn't just about having a unique experience, which it already does provide, but it also starts to question assumptions made by standardized controllers about what kind of people are expected.
And what is the expectation for play, but also what is the expectation for the player? Like, one of my favorite alternative control experiences is one my partner made for a game he was working on that I don't think he ever technically released, but called Space Chef. And in Space Chef, you have he wanted to make it so that anyone could play. And if you hand someone a controller, like a traditional controller, they can get really uncomfortable, especially if they're not from this space, which is something I think a lot of game designers take for granted. If I hand you like an Xbox controller and you've never touched one before, they're really intimidating. And so what he did was he made a bunch of foot pedals, because it's a one button game. And so he made a bunch of foot pedals, and people would be like, "Oh, I don't play games," and he'd be like, "You can drive a car," and he'd pull them over, and they would be able to play. Because I mean, that's for me what's exciting to me personally about alternative controls is that they're a real democratization of what is happening in games and allowing people who would be terrified of a project if I handed you a controller or a keyboard and mouse, if you were able to just engage with that on different terms so that everyone's also confused, even, that also works.
Right. So I actually, well, maybe we could let one more project and follow up on this topic about sort of like what alternative controls investigate, broadly speaking, and what they challenge and are able to question. We have one other project I could look at, which is Topomax Dreams.
Yes.
Let me take a look at some documentation of this one, and you could also let us know what we're looking at. We see a kind of spooky multicolored diorama and some ticker tape. What's going on?
So it is a receipt printer. So Project Specimen Theo, this is actually the prototype for Specimen Theo, the claw machine. It was called Topomax Dreams. We made it for, I think it's called the Brooklyn Night Market, which is an art show that we were able to participate in because of the pandemic. It's normally a bunch of like trucks, I think. I've never been because it's in Brooklyn and it's kind of like a shadowy kind of setup. And the idea is that someone would type something into Twitch, because this was all streamed on Twitch. And they would type something into Twitch, and then Twitch would send a code to us and a program we're running, and the little alien monster creature would tell you dreams.
Mm-hmm.
They're made algorithmically. My partner actually wrote the code for it. It's really, really interesting.
Language processing, I imagine.
Yeah, it's doing some stuff with that. It's finding out what type of, say, like verb, noun, etc. that you're using, and then it populates it into some pre-made sentences. So
this one has this striking physical output, but is workable to.
And that's actually what the Twitch. That image there is what Twitch is seeing.
So is this here then Twitch? Is this an example of like, is this to Twitch what Johann Sebastian Joust is to the PS Move controller? Like we're using Twitch and in
a way that it's not intended?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I think so. I think Twitch here is the alternative controller. Because, I mean, there are things that do this with Twitch. I mean, you have, say, Twitch plays Pokemon. Mm-hmm. And Twitch is now way better about integrating with games in general, mostly through sort of the Amazon Game Studios stuff. But yeah, I definitely don't think anyone who was designing Twitch chat was thinking, one day I want somebody to make an art project that creates hallucinogenic looking dreams inspired by aphasia. Like, that's not really the target of what that was designed to do. No.
The first use case that Twitch came up with, and yet it was what we needed.
I was really happy with it. It was really popular. I can't remember. We had so many people to come through and chat with us.
Yeah.
And it was a really cool experience. Yeah.
So, well, I'm trying to decide what to talk about because I wanted to tag that earlier conversation we were talking about assumptions that standardized controllers make and like what we gain when we suspend that as a priori or just what we have to accept as far as control schemes are concerned. And you said it's democratizing because it's sort of like if it's a brand new controller that no one's familiar with, everyone's in the same boat of being confused. Yeah. But do you ever feel like that you expect it to be confusing to everyone, but it turns out that actually is like a much more intuitive way to engage with an artwork than a standardized controller in the first place, therefore building another kind of path of access?
Yeah, it's kind of both.
Yeah.
Right? So there is the intuitiveness of it. So say like if I give you a controller, if I give you a guitar as a controller, you're not necessarily likely to know how to play a guitar. I don't know how to play a guitar. Like I have no idea how to play a guitar. But if I get you have like that tiny impulse in the back of your head, maybe, or just me, to smash that guitar. And so there's that instant thing of like, I have no idea what I'm doing when you're doing a guitar. But if I tell you, well, you can smash it, suddenly you know how to play this game 100%, even though what you're holding is a guitar.
Yeah. Did anyone, by the way, like not manage to beat the boss when it was played?
No. You can always beat the boss.
Okay.
You can always beat the boss.
If someone is refused, I will not smash. I'm going to take this for the team.
No, we chatted about it in the design phase, and we're like, so can you lose? And we're like, no. You don't necessarily. I'm of the opinion that a game does not need a lose state, but in this specific situation, a lose state doesn't make sense for the player because if you're a godlike rock star, you don't lose.
Right. The audience always cheers, even if something bad happens on stage.
Yeah, I mean, even if you smash your guitar.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I would agree. In the same way that suspending all of the conventions of a standardized controller breathes new, fresh air into possibilities of new projects, the relaxation of hard and explicit win states and loss states always opens up so many new possibilities and ideas that people can enjoy. Some, I guess, one of the more interesting experimental video game movements are kind of based off of that first step. Just like, let's get rid of the win state and the loss state and and see what happens from there. So
have fun, do whatever.
Exactly. Right. We don't realize that we get pleasure from that sort of thing, but it turns out it could be holding us back from trying other things.
I mean, there's extreme validity to the idea of a lose state, but I think it has to be earned. The same way that a win state has to be earned, I think a lose state has to be earned. Like, if I tell you that you can lose this game, it has to mean something for you to lose. Like, if for example, like One Night Only, if you lose in One Night Only, what does that mean? Like, you've still smashed the controller. So you've just
Everyone probably enjoyed watching you do it. So you probably still won at the end of the day. So
you feel great. The audience feels great, but you lost. I mean, you can probably make a story or a narrative where that makes sense, but it doesn't immediately feel authentic or real.
It's a cognitive mismatch of sorts.
Didn't rock hard enough. But like, you can feel that, and that could be a valid motion and thing to do. But again, I think most design is about creating authentic experiences or creating incredibly inauthentic ones, depending on what you're going for. But in this case, in no game for example, Sententable, which I know I said I didn't want to.
We weren't going to talk about it.
But I don't want to not talk about it. It's just I talk about it a lot. But Sententable has a lose state because it's a fighting game, because it needs a lose state.
Right.
You fight, you lose. Someone has to lose. In this specific sort of narrative, there's a narrative construct to that. Yeah.
Right. The loop can't re-loop itself without those bookends of like one person wins, the others loses, so that we can restart. Yeah. So I wanted to focus on those projects and all of those meaningful, contributions that alternative controllers provide. But you also have many roles and working in a lot of capacities. So maybe for others who are interested in working in interdisciplinary fashion, could you talk to us about your experience also as a writer and also as an organizer and sort of platform creator for other people's work? I'm putting this all into one question because
big question.
And you can answer for which ones seem like the one you want to answer the most, or which direction you want to answer the most in, because I know we won't have necessarily time to cover all of your.
I talk too much.
No. I would say I would disagree. But yeah, just because I should stop talking. I've already put the question to you. You've worked as a writer and an organizer.
I've worked with a lot of things.
And other things. So how does that all crisscross with also your work in designing these projects we went over?
Well, I think most of my, a lot of my design comes from a standpoint of narrative design, because that is my both principal training and also my longest creative background. Like I was, I was a kid with like all those 70-page notebooks that would fill with stories that are now lost to time. So I was always going to be a narrative designer, probably, or a narrative, or just in writing in general. And so like the first game I ever showed at an event, I showed at PAX. And it was which is a really alarming first event. Honestly,
What
not
made it alarming?
I'd never been to a game event before either. And the first one I went to was PAX East. And the first game I showed was a narrative game about, I think, a zombie apocalypse in Kentucky. And you murder someone with a frying pan. It's like all roads lead to you murdering someone with a frying pan. It makes sense, I promise, probably, but like that's the first game I ever showed, was a twine game about murdering someone with a frying pan at PAX. And so like I got really used to people hating what I made. It's the nicest way to put that. And so like the very first time I showed Syntentable, actually I think BitBash is another good example of this, which is Syntentable was my first like thing that I showed other places that was alternative controller. I'd have previous projects, but that's the first one that I showed, and at places outside of Kentucky. And I remember thinking, I was blown away because it was, again, BitBash. I was like, oh, hey, I just wanted to know if I could submit something. And I think it was Bryce wrote me back immediately and said, if it's that thing with all the buttons, I want it. And I was like, oh, really? Are you sure? Because I got so used to people hating.
You're supposed to not like this, yeah.
Yeah, and so like that also has the negative side effect of whenever somebody's really positive about something, I can't internalize it because I've gotten so used to years and years and years of both workshopping and creative writing, which is a very brutal and necessary task, but people are incredibly mean.
Right.
And it's coming from a place of support, but they're mean. So like when someone tells me something, I can't internalize any positivity because I also can't internalize negativity. This is a very weird answer to this question. Sorry.
Makes sense. Would you say that do you learn to sort of get a little fuel off of the more critical feedback loops?
No.
Okay.
Not me. Like for me, it's all feedback, and then I can go home later and I can like look at it like critically. But like because of my background in writing, none of it's positive, negative, doesn't matter. I hear it and then it's on a mental Post-it note.
Right.
And then I go home. And I'm just like, oh, okay. So people disliked this, or everyone thinks I should put Syntentable on Kickstarter, and they're wrong because why would I do that?
Yeah. So it is information. Now it needs to be sorted through the system later.
Yeah. And so there's that. For me, the most important thing that I got out of any of this stuff is I really love event planning, specifically for art events. Because I think it's a really great way to get people into the door who otherwise would not engage with this type of media at all. And that for me is like the most exciting thing. Like showing off to other developers is fine. Showing off to other gamers is honestly worse. But showing off to like somebody who is looking to say, for example, we had a gallery hop event for the claw, and being able to show that to people who are coming out on a Friday night to go see a bunch of paintings and galleries, and then they come across your thing and you see like the glee they get when, you know, this 65-year-old man gets a plushie for the first time from a claw machine. And he's just this big burly man with like a fishing cap on, and he's holding a stuffed bunny.
Right. And that was never going to be his expectation on a gallery.
No. That man was not going to show up at a gallery hop and exit with a stuffed bunny.
Well, that actually answers one of my lightning round questions, which I always ask, like, what sort of spaces are you most interested? I've tried to ask some similar questions of multiple guests.
Non-traditional spaces are the ones I'm most excited about showing in. Specifically, for example, we showed at the Kentucky State Fair one year. And that was really, really interesting because, again, people are going there to look at tractors.
Right. And what kind of project did you get to the State Fair?
Syntentable.
Oh, terrific.
I have
You got a ribbon?
I got a blue ribbon from the Kentucky State Fair.
Congratulations.
Sorry, it's hanging on the wall, and so it's like the only thing hanging on the wall in here is my blue ribbon from the Kentucky State Fair.
Well, that is also a VGA Fireside first. No one else has, to my knowledge, been received a blue ribbon for any of their work. featured on this program. And also, no one has mentioned getting a video game into the state fair. So that I think actually is a huge accomplishment. Here, are you ready for the rest of my lightning round question?
Yes, go for it.
All right. So how do you situate your work in relation to the term contemporary art?
I've never thought about it before. I know I'm an artist because I've shown something at the Smithsonian before. That's it.
There you go. So
that's my only connection to art.
Perhaps one pipe that connects, but the rest, other connections you just can't say.
I don't know. It's I was never ever intending to be an artist. It's a label that fits kind of uncomfortably. Both in the sense because I use a lot of like pre-made stuff and I don't have any training in art necessarily. So like I took like a photography class, like I don't have training in traditional art stuff. So when I'm coming at stuff, it's like through stuff I find interesting on like stumble upon levels of internet. So like Christo and Jean-Claude or Comme des Garçons, the fashion designer, like I'll get hung up on like something like that and just be like, oh, I can do something with this. But then I don't really have any connection to the art world at all.
But still tapping into traditions such as performance, such as the ready-made, such as finding your way into a discourse while turning away from like there's sort of gatekeeping of skilling. You would like go through a de-skilling process and finding whatever skills you need for the project you're supposed to make. I think that all does connect overall to the contemporary art world, but that can also just be my perspective. If you know,
I trust your judgment.
Thanks. Other lightning round question: how much do you think one's region or physical location becomes imprinted in the games they make? How much does location inform your work?
I think a lot. I think I wouldn't be making this kind of thing if I lived in a major city, both because I don't think I'd be able to afford the space to do it. And also just from like a practical standpoint, and also because Kentucky is weirdly like the alt control was for a while. We joked that we were the alt control capital of the country, because there's just so many people here who are all making things, and you could drive to Radio Shack and buy the parts. Which you can't do anymore because Radio Shack is dead. But you get the parts for it, and you had a community of people who were all doing this. And I wouldn't have done this necessarily if Richie Hoagland hadn't made a deluxe turbo racing 360. I never would have gone to it. Like right now, my community for alt control is incredibly multinational, but it wouldn't have ever started without that local connection first. And also, I think alt control games live and die at regional shows.
Absolutely. So if this is too much of a put you on the spot question, you don't have to answer it, but
that's okay.
Could you, if you were to like conceive of like that community of artists you speak of as like a Kentucky school of game making, are there any like particular trends or like similarities you see arise from like a particular group of people in a particular place?
It's mostly repurposing ready-made objects. So it's a big proponent because we're used to most of the Kentucky scene designs things for children's museums, because Rules and Play, which is our local art show that I help run, is at a children's art museum. So everything we design now, especially from our circuit, like we're one of the only alt control communities I know of that designs towards being able to be touched constantly for 2 months straight. Like when I talk to somebody from outside of the state and I'm like, oh, hey, we're looking for pieces to bring in, I'm always like, and just so you know, it has to survive 2 months of children.
Right.
And other developers just aren't ready for that, and not in a bad way. That's just they're not designing for that. And so we have a reliance on ready-made projects. Like I've made projects using beds from Walmart or pre-existing phones, like things like that, just because they can withstand the demolition of a small child.
Well, we're just about out of time, Amanda. I know, I can't believe it. But so I've got one more question from the lightning round for you, which also is, you take or leave, which is, and it's not a hard gotcha one. It's just lining you up for whatever you want to talk about. Do you have any future projects or even dreams of future projects that you'd like to tell us about before we're done today?
Sure. I have a project I've been working on for 2 years that I've been referring to as the dementia quilt because I'm bad at naming. I have a local a developer friend named Mild Mojo, who I have helped me name things because I'm bad at naming them. But the idea is I wanted to create a touch-based quilt that talks about memory and memory loss in relation to my grandmother, because she both taught me how to quilt and also passed away from dementia and COVID. So I wanted to combine all those things together into a project. And probably should have just done it during COVID more so, because I don't have to worry about people touching it.
Right.
Because I can't figure out how to keep it clean. That's been the main hang up. Seriously, that's actually been the main hang up, is I don't know how to create a touch-based thing that's fabric and can remain clean. So if anybody has any like tips, they can message me.
Reach out. Contact information, I'm sure, is on Amanda's website. So it's like you touch different squares of the quilt, and that's how you
The
get
idea
feedback?
is that use conductive thread, and then the conductive thread is embroidered into the quilt, and then you can touch it and stroke it. And it was going to use audio cues to talk to you and tell you stories and memory. And then those memories can be fragmented, as can the embroidery on the quilt.
Terrific. You will have to let me and the rest of VGA know, and hopefully our audience know, when the dementia quilt.
When I can do it.
Yeah, when you can get to it. Amanda, thank you so much for taking this time to talk to us about your work. Before we actually close, this is in fact the internet, so we need to finish by plugging things. Is there anything else you'd like to plug?
Well, you can see. So there's Run Jump Dev, which is the organization I'm a part of. We're on basically most social media networks, but predominantly Twitter, and we have a website. And then for me personally, it's amandathrows.rocks. That's my website. And then I can be found on Twitter at Barely Concealed, is probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I'm on a bunch of other things, but really for game dev stuff, the best way to talk to me is on Twitter.
Terrific. On behalf of VGA, I will let you know that we can do this program. We try to hit once a month, and we also have the VGA Zine. That's a monthly web zine that you can sign up for by going to our website and signing up for the newsletter. And that is a quick and responsive and web zine of different kinds of cultural takes on emerging video game art and culture. If you like this program and VGA Zine and want to support the things we do, you can always purchase a fine art print. There's a whole collection. We've
demoed some of them before. They're beautiful.
That's absolutely right. The VGA print collection highlights have been exhibited in Kentucky past, which is an exciting opportunity for us. And if you would like any or multiples of that collection, you could look at them all on the VGA website and buy a fine art print that helps support programs like this and everything else we do. I think that might take care of it. So, am I forgetting anything? I'm always asking Bryce if I've forgotten anything.
Bryce is on top of things.
Yeah. Oh,
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no. Okay, in that case, and if you'll bear with me, please allow me to re-thank everyone who made this program possible. To close, let me thank the producer and director of operations for VGA, Bryce Poles. I want to thank the designer of our graphics and the director of communications, Eleanor Schicktail, the VGA staff, the VGA board for everything you do. I want to thank the Independent Game Designers Association Chicago chapter. Thank you, Ross. Thanks to the Intro to New Media class at the University of Illinois at Chicago for joining us. Thanks to game design students at the University of Wisconsin. Thanks to Peter. I want to say thanks to the media art and graphic design and illustration students from the SVAD program at the University of South Carolina. Thanks to Mina and Youngwon. And thanks to game design students from DePaul University. Thanks to Kayla. Thank you to the media art and game design module students in radio, TV, film at Northwestern. Thanks to Derek. And thanks to students from Tulane for joining us from the Digital Media Practices program. Thanks to John for spreading the word. Thank you, Electric Mirrors, for the groovy intro music. And thank you to the Oldham Music Center Youth Brass Band, whose fanfare you're about to experience in reverse. And if you know an organization or group that would be interested in this program or have any feedback at all, please drop us a line at info@vgagallery.org. We would love to hear from you. Any final catchphrases or words of wisdom that you wanted to audition tonight to send us off, Amanda?
Oh gosh, no, I'm terrible at that kind of thing.
Okay. Then in that case, we'll just close with my old catchphrase. Thank you for joining us. And from all of us at VGA Fireside, please stay warm.